Hello everyone, this is Vinay here from Learn Coding with Vinay, and welcome back to this video series where we are building contactless API using ASP.NET Core 9 and ChatGPT as our coding assistant. This is video number 5. In the previous video, we actually generated our first migration and created the database, and for user table, we put down some data also in it. Right. In this video, which is video number 5, we will be working on login and register API. Right. So let's move ahead to ChatGPT and let's discuss our idea with ChatGPT. Right. So if you remember, ChatGPT has already suggested, at the end of the our previous prompt response, that what should be the next. So here it says that build, register, and login API. So this is what we are going to do, right? But at the same time, we don't want JWT authentication now. We will do it later, right? So let me go ahead and instruct ChatGPT with the prompt, right? Okay, so here a quick prompt I have written. What I am saying is, let's build, let me make this, let's build, register, and login API using best coding and security standards for C# and EF core. FYI, we will not implement JWT now. We will do it at the end of this, at the end of all, all APIs, as we don't want to enter token again and again while testing rest of the APIs. Right. Please guide step by step here. So let's proceed and see what ChatGPT has to say. So let's go over, the response ChatGPT has generated. We have requested it to, create the methods for login and register with best coding practice of C# and entity framework as well, right? So let's say perfect. This is exactly right. Sequence is for teaching, and okay, teaching, and that's not a thing, right? Okay, this is good. So high level plan, DTOs. So one common practice says that your API should never expose your actual entities. So basically, if we talk about a user table or user class, let's say it has 5 properties. So user entity should not be exposed to the client directly with the same name or with the same properties, right? It should be always via DTOs, which is called data transfer object, right? So client does not know what actually our implementation has, right? Client does not know our class name or table name or actually properties or column name, right? That's what we should do. So it is suggesting us, okay, use DTOs, never expose entities directly. Okay. Then register API. Okay, register API should have input, validation input, check for duplicate email. If one person is registered in our application using one email, no other can, user can register using the same email. Right. Then PIN should be hashed, save user, then login, validate credential, verify hash PIN, right? Password, and return minimum user information. At this moment, we are not returning token. We will return the token, JW token, once we move ahead in the video series. Right. So let's say it says create DTOs. Okay. Let's see what DTOs it has suggested. So it has suggested that in the DTO folder, create one more folder called auth. In that, create this register request DTO.cs. Okay. With this names, this property and this validation required max length, this required email, this should be email address, required max address, this, and this should be 4-digit number. Okay, so this is good. Now login usually require email and password only, both field are definitely required, and this should be email and this should be 4-digit pin. So the validation are also seems to be in good place. Right, let's move ahead. And now login and register response, auth response, right? So once user is logged in, what it should return, if the method finds the user, it should return user ID, name, and email, right? Never return password. Obvious, that is quite obvious thing, right? So if we would have written user entity directly over here, then that would have password column also. So that is one reason, one example why we should use DTOs. Right, so let's move to the next one. Create auth controller. Okay, so it is telling us to create a web API controller called auth controller that will have these methods. Right, so first of all, we'll have to declare the DB context. Okay, then we have the register method that will take register DTO as input and it will return task I as in result. Right, okay. Now why I as in result? Because sometime your API will returning one or the other class, or maybe no found, or maybe bad request, right? So I request is a interface that actually accommodates all these. If we would have specified this for a particular type, then we'll have to make sure we are returning that type every time, right? But since we don't know what would be the return of our API, so that's the reason best practice says return always IXN result, right? So here we are returning bad request. See, then if we move ahead, here we are returning conflict. If we move down, here we are returning whatever object was created with the register method, right? Basically the response, right? So three different types we are returning within the single function, and that is the reason we should use IXN result. So this is something best practice ChatGPT has suggested us, right? Let's move ahead. Login again. So login will have login DTO as input. Again, it is IXN result. So if there is some error in the validation, it says bad request, right? If user found, then it goes ahead, and if user is there, then it goes ahead to found the, okay, email is there. If email user is not equal null, okay, invalid credential, right? So here it is checking if the user itself, basically email is not there, then it says invalid credential, right? Then moves ahead, it verifies the password, right? If the password is valid, right, then if not, sorry, not valid, then it says invalid credentials again. But if this is valid, basically it found the username and password combination in database over here, right? Then it returns the user detail, which is user ID, name and email, and it is returning with OK flag. This OK will actually in the API, when we run this, I'll explain this again. With OK, the status code of this would be 200, and response will be this JSON of this particular class, right? So, and let's take a look at what it has suggested. Security based practice, what it has followed: password has been hashed, no password ever returned, okay, excellent. Generic error message, no user enumeration, right? Okay. Validation at DTO level, excellent. No JWT yet, okay, that we'll do later, right? And then we'll be testing this in Swagger with this one example, right? So let's do it. Let's follow the steps and implement it. So let me go ahead on top, right? And let me create this DTO folder we already have. Let me go ahead and create the auth folder in that. So I'll go to Visual Studio. I have DTOs. I'll say right click and add new folder. We'll give it a name same as ChatGPT has suggested, auth, AUTH. AUTH. Right. Now let's move to the next step. Now it has given us the two DTOs, one for register request and one for login request. So let me create this DTO quickly, both of them, and I'll come back. To save time and to reduce the video length, this is required because my machine is little slow. It takes time to create all these classes and everything, all those stuff. So I'll create these classes in the background, and I'll when once done, I'll explain what I have done. So till then, I'm pausing the video. I'll come back. Yeah, so let me show you what I did. So I created the auth folder, and I created all these three classes: auth response DTO, login request DTO, register request DTO. Right, these classes are created. Now let's move to the next step over here. Now over here it says create a auth controller. Right, so what we will be doing, since we have already added classes multiple time but not added controller, so I'll show demonstrate how to add controller. So we'll say add controller. We'll take the name from here. Wait for a while, right? And we have make sure by default many times it will be MVC controller selected, but we will have to go to API tab from here, and we'll have to select the API controller. So make sure we have selected not MVC controller, we have selected API controller, right? And let's take the empty one, add. Right, let's replace it with the name which ChatGPT has given us, auth controller. Let's say add. Let's go to the code again. Right, now the first thing it has done is to declare our DB context in this auth, because for any DB operation we will need this DB context in every controller, right? So this is what it has done, and by declaring a private variable and passing it to the constructor, over here, this code is actually an example of dependency injection using constructor, and this is quite common in ASP.NET Core. And we will have a private variable declared, we will have a constructor where we will inject the particular class, interface, or service, whatever it is, and we'll assign that private variable over here, right? So here we have declared private variable underscore context. This is an EF, entity framework core context class, which we will be using to carry out various database operation, be it insert, update, delete, or selecting record, right? So let me copy this and put it down it over here, right? So this is all good. Okay, so we'll have to keep the import. Okay, it took it automatically. Excellent. And next it has given us the register method, right? HTTP post method, which has register request DTO as input and output as IXN result. Ultimately it will, if the registration was successful, it will return whatever was created, right? So let me copy this and put it down it over here, right? So let me save this. No error, looks good. Okay, we'll have to import this from the DTO folder. DTO auth, and let's fix few other errors also. So this has to be from entity framework core. Let me say dot and using this. Okay, excellent. Let me say dot, and this we have it into the service class, service folder, right? So it will say services, import services. Excellent. Now this is a user entity, so this is there in your model entity class. Okay, so have that. Now let me save, and there are no error. So register method looks good. Right, now let's have the login method in. So let me copy this login method, come back here and paste it, save it, and let's see if we have any error or not. So this looks good, no error, right? Now let's move. Okay, now it is. Now let's test. It says let's test. So let me run the Visual Studio and let the Swagger output come. Wait till the time. So I'm running the application. Let's wait till the time the Swagger output comes up. Okay, so Swagger is coming up. Let's wait for a while. Okay, so we have our auth controller, we have weather forecast controller. We already tested this. Let's test this now. Let's test our login because we already have two user in. So let's try to test this login method. Try it out, and let me put down debugger also, so you also understand it well. Let me put down debugger over here. Okay, let it get applied debugger, and over here what we will be doing, we'll passing the Vinay at the rate gmail.com, and the password was 1111, right? So let's see if debugger was applied or not. Okay, let's wait for a while. Okay, so debugger is also applied, right? And let's see, let's push this now. So I'll go to swagger Vinay at the rate gmail.com. So ideally this should result in a successful login. Let's say execute. Let's say it lands it over here or not. Wait and watch. Okay, so we are in, right? Let's see what is coming in our request. So while debugging any class method, make sure you analyze the input, because most of the time error or desired output is not generated because the input were not passed correctly, right? So a good practice says, always while debugging a method, make sure your inputs are desired inputs only, right? So let me test this. Ideally it should pop up, but let's wait. Let me say F10. Let me move ahead one line, then may then may it come up. Okay, now let's see what we are getting. Let's expand this and see what is the input of our. Yeah, so it says vinay@gmail.com 1111. Excellent, right? Now it is checking the model state whether it is valid or not. Basically, all models pass the validation or not. Correct email is coming up, 4-digit pin is coming up or not. So it is valid, right? So it will move ahead from here. Right, again it is trying to, it goes to the database, right? Here it is the entity framework code that goes to the context, ultimately database, and finds whether we have a user with this email or not, right? So let's wait for a while, let's wait for it to come up and see. Ideally it should find this user Vinay, because we have already feed in two records, Vinay and Hiral, when we generated our first migration, right? So let's see whether user has come up or not. Right. Yeah. So we have the user. Right. So it's cell number. Ideally, we should not retry the password. That's okay. It is there. Here we have retrieved the entire entity. So that's okay. Now user is active. Obviously, user is active. Right. So it is not invalid credential. Now here we are comparing the password with the password is password. We are comparing the password with the password passed and with the password we have into the database, and whatever password is passed, that has to be converted into a hashed password, right? So that's what it is: verify password, request password, and user password, right? It is comparing these two. If I go to, let me open the service, and then let me open up and then see this verify password. It has two inputs: string password and store password. Store password is actually the password stored in database, and this password is the password coming from the input. Now this input will come from any, maybe mobile application, maybe web application. Currently we are testing it from Swagger, so it is coming from Swagger, right? If we are testing it from the Postman, it will come from the Postman, basically API input, right? And it will compare it and check whether the same password was supplied or not, right? So let's see. Now, just how are these? So it is true, right? Because I have passed the correct username and password combination. So if login was successful, then what we are doing, it is returning the auth response DTO, which has username, user ID, name, and email. Right. So let me just say F5 over here, and let's see our output on the Swagger. See here, we have the code as 200, right? That is okay. So this is the 200 is the code which we will be looking for at the maximum time, right? When we are testing for a success scenario, right? Now let's try to pass the wrong credentials and see what is happening. So I have pressed this, right? So validation is good, right? Because all data is passed. Now email is also found, user is also active, but password will not be compared, right? So if I go ahead, now this will be false, right? So what it will give, invalid credentials, right? Now let's see what is happening, what is the output over there, right? See the response code, it is 401 and it says invalid credentials, right? So basically the API calling was successful, but the result is not the desired one, right? Because not correct input were passed, right? Now let's try one more scenario where I am not passing a valid email, right? So let's say execute, then it stops us there, and there itself says the email field is not valid because we have not used @gmail, right? So let's pass this, and it has also given error for password, saying that you are supposed to pass 4-digit pin, right? Here we have only passed 3, and so that validation is happening there and there itself. But once we provide the accurate data, it will go to the API, and rest of the logic will be executed over there, right? So login seems to be working quite well. Now let's register, let's work on the register. So before that, let me take out the login URL, because we will test it on the Postman also, right? So let's do that first, and this time let me just remove the debugger. We don't need debugger, right? Let me bring in postman over here. Right. So I have already created one collection called contact list web API where we already have the weather forecast. Right. Let's try to execute it, whether it works or not. So whenever you are working on, testing APIs, right? Whenever you are working on testing APIs, make sure you create this collection from here, and in that collection, you put down all your APIs. Right. So let's say over here, let's say login. For login, we'll create one more request. So let it come up. Okay. Here I'll put down the URL of the login. It's our post method, so we'll say post, right? In the body, we will say raw, and this will be JSON. And here we will put down the input request, right? So basically this one. So let me go ahead and this put it down over here, right? I'll pass the correct one first, right? And I'll say send. In the below response, we should get the valid credentials and user detail, right? So it should give us 200. Okay, right? And since the username and password are valid, it has given us the user detail. Now let's pass the invalid one and let's see what is happening. It says invalid credential 401 unauthorized, right? Let's make this login. Let's give it a name login. And for weather forecast also, let me add the weather forecast. Ideally, it is not required for this project, but just to show you an example how you should put down, how you should keep your things organized in Postman. So we'll take this, and this time it is a get request. So we will keep the action parameter as get only. I'll say hit, and see the output is coming. So this is working fine in Postman also, right? So let me minimize this, and let's now move to our register method. So try it out. Let's say, so here let's say I am. Let's test the negative scenario first. I'll say Vinay. I'll try to register with an existing user only and see let's what is happening. Okay, this is 10. Okay, and let me put down debugger on the register method. Execute. Right, so let's see what is coming up in the register. Right, whatever we have passed coming up good. Let's move ahead. So validation has passed, everything was passed, so it is good. Now it is going to check whether the email passed over here already exists in our database or not. If exists, then it says conflict email already registered, right? So let's say now it has conflict, and let's say what is the output. So it gave 409 email already registered, right? Because we cannot register in any of the application using the same email address, right? So let's try to register using some other email which is not there. So as ChatGPT has suggested, we'll keep the test, right? So let's give this test at the gmail.com. We'll make this, let number be this. We'll keep this password as 333, and we'll say execute, right? So this time what is happening, validation is passed, the email does not exist, right? It is hashing the password, and then it is creating the user entity. Now this is coming a DTO, but while saving we are supposed to save the entity. So DTO has to be converted into the user entity. That is what it is doing. And then we are adding it to the database using entity frameworks method context dot whatever entity dot add, and that entity has to be passed. This will add, but these save changes will actually write into the database, right? So this is done, and in the response the we are returning the user id, name and email. Now let's see what do we have, what we are returning, right? So this is user id number 3, third user, right? Name of the user and and email. This is what we are returning. So let's see what is coming up into the or swagger output, right? 3 test the gmail.com. 201. Now 201 is actually, for 201 is okay, sorry, 200 was okay, right? This one, this, and 201 is something that record created. 201 indicates record created. There are certain codes, 1xx, 2xx, 3xx, 4xx, 5xx, right? There are certain code of APIs that needs to be, that's a theoretical part that you can go on the internet and check it out very easily, right? So this is basically says that record was created. 201 says it is a success and record was created. Now if the record was created, let's try to test this guy's login, right? So what we'll be doing, we'll pass test at the gmail.com and we'll pass this 333. So this should result in a successful login. Let's say execute, and yes, it says 200 and the execution is working nicely, right? Let's try to test this from the postman also. So what do we need to do? Grab the register URL, this one. No, not login, sorry, we'll have to grab the register one, this one. We'll take this one, come back to postman and add one more, and again this is a post method. So while executing the function, we'll have to select the operation as post, this one, post, right? Let's then say register, right? Let me put down this. Go to body, here we will pass the inputs, it should be raw and this should be JSON, right? What we will doing, we'll be copying this, we'll be pasting it over here, and this time we'll say postman. Let's say postman, let's say postman at the gmail.com. Number b, let's change it to something random. Number does not make a difference, and here we'll say 4444, right? Let me execute this. So it landed over here. I'll say F5. We don't need to debug. We'll just check for the output. So it says 201. See, the postman correctly says it is created, right? New record was created basically, right? And the ID is 4, name is postman, and postman at the gmail.com, right? So we have tested the application login also. Both are working very nicely, and positive negative scenario, everything is handled correctly. Now let's have the final verification check. Go to database and see whether they are logged, these records are logged into the database or not. Ideally it should be. Let's see. Right, so we can see we have now 4 records in our user table, 1 2 3 and 4. So register is working fine, login is working fine, right? So that's it in this video. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and I hope you are finding this series interesting. So I'll hope to see you in the next video as well. Stay tuned, guys. Thanks a lot for watching.